Alright guys, so in this video, I'm going to be talking about College Football 25, the official release, released to everyone today, earlier, maybe on Monday or Tuesday, released to people that had the deluxe edition. So we've been playing it for a little bit, 4 or 5 days, most people, and I wanted to go over some of the issues I have with this game. Now, obviously, a lot of people love this game. I mean, it's the first game we've had in 11 years in terms of college football. That's great. The idea that now I can, simulate games. I started doing college football predictions maybe 3 years ago, and I never had really a tool to simulate games with a newer engine, and now we have that. But I'm going to go over some major problems with this game, especially when you look at the Dynasty mode, which is the mode normally I exclusively play. I know there's also Road to Glory, people like that, that's fine, but normally I just try and do Dynasties, and I'm very surprised at how bare bones it is considering how they hyped it up to be. The first biggest issue that I'm sure is obviously going to have to be corrected, because this is game breaking for Dynasty mode. I mean, it makes it completely unrealistic. It is the sim engine. It is totally ridiculous that they have an FCS team. I forget which, maybe it's like FCS Midwest or something, ranked as like a 77 overall. I have no clue who implemented that or why that would even be a thing. All of the FCS teams should be like, their overall rating should be like 55. FCS teams basically never upset Power 4 teams, and if they do, it's like this crazy scenario. But it's not only that, it's also like multiple group of 5 teams making the playoff year one of simulations. It's just so unrealistic. I wanted to do a thing where I would just simulate the 2025 season and try and go really in depth with everything, go week by week, go over every game just for fun now that we have, an updated game that has all the rosters correct and things like that. But you can't even do that right now because the sim engine is so unrealistic. There's really no point. Like, I'm going to be talking about a team. I mean, I've seen Oklahoma State be the number one overall seed at 12-0. It just makes no sense. And I think people are saying, well, they implemented the Madden sim. There's no way they did that, because there is not even close to the amount of parity in college football that there is in the NFL. So I don't think they did that. Maybe they did it and they neutered it down, but it is not even close to how it should be. I mean, we're talking about, in terms of college football, Ohio State's basically an auto lock to make the 12-team playoff. Georgia's an auto lock. Michigan's probably going to get there. Oregon's basically an auto lock. Alabama. I mean, there are teams that unquestionably will lose a maximum of like 2 or 3 games, and it's just not reflected. I mean, I had one year one, Ohio State was 3-3 at one point. The sim engine, there's just way too much parity. It's completely unrealistic. Another thing, obviously, when it comes to the scoreboard, this is the weird thing with the scoreboard. ESPN literally announced yesterday they've got a full new graphics package, because now they're really embracing the SEC, because they have lost the Big Ten or whatever, because the Big Ten now, it's on Fox, it's on NBC, it's on CBS, and so now they're going full into the SEC, and they announced a new scoreboard. Well, then why couldn't they have just implemented the old ESPN scoreboard from the last 4 years into this game? Like, dude, does ESPN still have the rights to that scoreboard? Is it really that ridiculous? We just want a game that feels real, and when you have this fake scoreboard, just like they do with Madden, you lose a lot in terms of the atmosphere of the game. I know casual players don't care about that, but that is something to where you do lose a lot when you have just a fake scoreboard that's not real, never been used in real life. Also, I wish they would have used the CBS scoreboard, but obviously it costs money. My only thing is like, well, now ESPN just announced a complete new scoreboard. They retired the old one that they had been using the past 4 years. Why couldn't they have just implemented the old one into this game, considering ESPN isn't even using it? But I digress. Let's move on to the other issues. I mean, this next one, I just don't understand. And this is another thing that casual people don't care about, but it is the sunset literally not happening in this game at all, which completely kills the vibe of 3:30 games. And honestly, early in the season, also 7:30 games, because early in the season, the sun doesn't set that early, so you'll get a 7:30 game, and it'll still be twilight out for about the first quarter. But definitely the 3:30 games. You've got the Iron Bowl, Alabama, Auburn. It's totally let out the entire game in late November. Completely unrealistic. any game, like Ohio State hosts a 3:30 game in November, 3/4 are played in the complete dark in real life. They don't even have the shadows going across the field. This is something that has already been implemented into Madden. I remember simulating games, and at the beginning of the game it would be light out, especially the 425 games, and at the end of the game it would be pitch black. I feel like in 2024, that's got to be like bare minimum here. You could see in 2000, I mean, this was something that they started implementing, I think, in like 2007, 2008. Because you could understand, all right, it's a 3:30 game, the shadows are over the field, but they don't have the technology to necessarily make it realistic and keep moving those shadows as the sun sets, and then give us the nice twilight, like the beautiful sky in NCAA 14. That's another thing. The sky in NCAA 14 is way better than this sky. It's just so much more vibrant. But that's another thing. I'm just shocked in terms of an oversight not putting that into the game. Again, that's got to be like the bare minimum, and they didn't even have that, so that's another issue. Another issue is the rankings logic. There's been multiple reports I've seen on the internet and just my experience. I mean, you'll have like a 6-6 Ohio State team being ranked 11th overall. I'm not kidding. There was this thing where Georgia was like, finished the season 6-7. They lost their bowl game. They were ranked like 15th. And then you've got teams like Western Michigan entering like the top 15. It's just completely unrealistic. And I guess it has to do with some type of algorithm they're doing to where if these teams have quality losses, I really think it's almost like their overall rating is affected by where these teams are ranked, because it's always the really good upper echelon teams like the Ohio States and the Georgias that you'll see that are like 3-3 and they're ranked number 9. So it's like they take into the overall, like, oh, Georgia's a 94, even though they're 3-3, they're still a really good team on paper, so we have to rank them. That should not be taken into account at all. This is just my speculation. I don't know. But that is another big issue. I'm not mentioning the gameplay, because obviously the gameplay is the best component of this game, and they definitely made it faster, which is what they should have done, because in general, college football is way faster than the NFL. There's way more scoring. Teams play a lot higher tempo, so that's very realistic, and I do generally like the gameplay. Obviously, there's been a lot of glitches within the gameplay, but that's to be expected on basically any new game that releases. They're going to patch all those type of gameplay glitches, I'm sure. The things that I don't know if they will make an improvement on are like the progressive sunset that probably we're not going to see in this game. I would imagine they might try and tweak the way the rankings are done, because, I mean, why not just use some type of... The thing is, you can't even use ESPN's FPI because their FPI system is totally messed up as well. You would have to create like an algorithm and a criteria that would override, even if a team's like a 94 or 95, if they're 6-6, they can't be in the top 25. I mean, come on, let alone like inside the top 11. So that's just another issue when it comes to this game. I will say this is something small, but I will give them credit for the menu animations and just how swiftly you can move from menu to menu, and also choosing teams. You know, we expect this to be very good, but it was presented very well. Unfortunately, when it comes to the bad part of the presentation, obviously not using a real scoreboard, and then also just a total lack of a halftime show. We're still missing that in both Madden and now college football. Look, I'm not saying the game is terrible. I was just surprised when you look at all of the features in NCAA 14 compared to college football 25. I'm talking about the dynasty mode. It is real bare bones. The menus, the screens are very hard to operate in terms of not having accessible information. You can't necessarily click on certain teams and go to their history. There's just not a lot involved in the dynasty. And again, I mean, we're in the year 2024. You think this would be something that would be implemented at this point. A lot of this has to do with the fact that the bar for EA right now is on the floor. I mean, most people are just like, oh, we're so thankful that they made a college football game. And I can understand that. I get it. But if this was a thing where we've had a college football video game for the last 10 years, this game would be ridiculous at this point compared to what it is now in terms of the detail. Like when it comes to even creating your own team, you don't have any generic stadiums. You have to choose a stadium that a current team plays at. And another thing, you guys see the Hawaii situation. They literally imported a generic Madden stadium into NCAA 25 and made it Hawaii Stadium. Now, Hawaii does technically, I mean, they play at a stadium. It's right now, they're in between moving from Aloha Stadium. They're going to knock that down. They're in almost a practice stadium. And then they will be moving into their new stadium, but it hasn't even started construction. So instead of giving them where they're at right now, which is kind of like a practice stadium or like a smaller stadium that they did just expand the seating to like 20K, they just imported, which is totally unrealistic, by the way, a Madden generic stadium that has the capacity of like 60,000, and that's where they have Hawaii playing. And so what you can't even, I mean, there's no seating expansions. It's the same exact problem you have in NCAA 14. Let's say you build Bowling Green up to be this dynasty, and they've been ranked number one the past 3 years, and they've won 3 straight national titles. You're still playing in basically a high school stadium that seats 20,000. Yeah, that's realistic. That's very realistic. So you can't expand your stadium. There's no upgrades. They don't have a thing to where, if you have a small stadium, you're a small school like Kennesaw State, you can potentially build a new stadium with a capacity of like 50,000 or 60,000 or something like that. So I'm just surprised at how bare bones the dynasty mode is. And normally with games like this, I know a lot of people are coping saying, oh, the patches are going to fix these things. A lot of these things are just not going to be fixed. Another thing, and this is another small one, but even the ticker at the bottom of the screen compared to NCAA 14 is just crap. I mean, it scrolls through like the same 6 games. It's not even definitive in terms of, it just looks really bland. Like, why not at least include the logos? Why not at least include an outline of the team that won more rather than it just looks so barren to me. So that's just another thing. And then you also have, and again, this seems like bare minimum in the year 2024, but it's like they get a pass because it's the first game in 10, 11 years. But when can we actually get the FCS teams? I mean, we're seriously facing FCS Midwest, FCS Southeast. It just kills the game in terms of any type of realism. You would think they'd be able to get the FCS teams into the game, and that would bring in a whole nother component of being able to actually rebuild a real FCS team. Now they've got it to where you can't even import an FCS logo on the team builder. They'll block it. And people are saying, well, you can kind of get around it maybe by building a similar logo. This is all just a bit of a letdown, if we're going to be honest. I mean, I get, and of course they've got to bring Ultimate Team. Why don't you just keep Ultimate Team in Madden? Who even plays Ultimate Team? All right, I'm not going to, but it's just like, Jesus, man. They got to make money somehow, so they bring Ultimate Team to college football, and I don't even think people want to play Ultimate Team, but apparently it makes money for them. So, and then the online matches as well. I know people like playing those, but for me, I mean, this is how the video games used to be when I was younger, 2014. You would play dynasties. That's the whole point of them. I understand people want to play multiplayer. That's fine, and the gameplay is good. It's very fast. They implemented it well, but in terms of the dynasty, I mean, even the road to glory, you don't even start in high school. They've scaled a lot back from the 2014 game, and I think they knew they had all this runway. They have a bunch of these EA simps. No matter what, they're just going to say it's a great game. It's the best game ever. How can you call this the best game ever? It's got significantly less features than the one from 10 years ago. And look, we're happy we have a game that's fine, but at some point you do have to be impartial and say, seriously, you spent 3 years on this game and this is what you produce? We're getting less features. We're getting no dynamic lighting where the sun doesn't even say, oh yeah, go play the Rose Bowl. Have fun playing the Rose Bowl. Yeah, it'll be sunlight the entire game. It's real realistic. And again, casual people don't care about that, but it's just, it's so unrealistic. And they can't even get an old scoreboard from ESPN that they've retired now. I don't know, man. I mean, to me, I think the game is a bit of a letdown, especially if you're a dynasty player. But if you just care about gameplay, it is good. The recruiting, I think, was done well, and you could tell they spent a ton of time into the recruiting. It's very hard because people want realistic recruiting. Well, realistic recruiting requires you to literally spend hours every season, like off season, trying to recruit these kids, and it's constant visits. It's very hard to actually implement a realistic recruiting that isn't a total time drain on the user. So I do think they did do a good job on the recruiting. There's no perfect, you just can't make a perfect recruiting system that's realistic. It would just take the user too much time to go through each season and send out all these offers and do all this stuff. I will say, they really should not allow those really bad teams to get 5 stars. It should be literally impossible until they reach a certain prestige. Like maybe they become a 2.5 star or 3 star school, then they can start getting 5 stars. But I would implement an algorithm to where, like, if you're a 1-star school, and I know you could maybe say, well, there's this one exception one year in real life when Jackson State got Travis Hunter. But this is something that just simply never happens. Like Kennesaw State getting a 5-star because they invest all of their resources into them in real life, it's impossible. So I don't think that should be something that should be possible in the game until they get to at least like a 2.5 star, 3-star prestige. You start rebuilding them, and maybe in year 2 or year 3, something like that can be implemented. So that's just some things in terms of a review. Honestly, I think the biggest letdown is the lack of dynamic lighting. I can't believe that's not in a game in 2024. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.